Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the steam-heavy kitchens of Tang, Dynasty, China, right at the cusp of sunrise. The firewood is already crackling, smoke curling up into a thatched ceiling blacking, deep with decades of stories. Someone's clanging metal pots while still half asleep, a bronze ladle swinging loosely from their wrist. A small boy in saffron robes stumbles in, rubbing his eyes, and sets down a basket of spring onions. This is the star of the day for one of the most sophisticated imperial kitchens the world has ever known. And you're here, standing at the edge of it, already half SW, Edie, and wondering why everything smells faintly like garlic and wet clay. You corner like forgotten thoughts. The cooks here eat fast, not because they're in a hurry, but because the flavors are so familiar they don't need savoring. Just another bite. Just another bowl. You sit on a stone ledge beneath a potted plum tree. Its blossoms are still sleeping, curled tight like tiny fists. A boy next to you, maybe 10, slurps from his bowl with gusto, then offers you a boil. You peel the egg shell slowly, watching cracks spider across the surface. The boy beside you burps loudly and grins. You grin back. Der, so, ek, laukter. This is the kind of breakfast that doesn't. Ing a smell. A peculiar one. You know that moment when your nose says, wait, is that food or medicine? That's the moment you're having. The scent leads you down a side corridor to a smaller room tucked behind a set of folding S. Screens painted with cranes and pine trees. Inside, a low table, 2 men with serious eyebrows, and a steaming clay pot bubbling like it's about to spill state secrets. They barely glance up. One is grinding something in a stone mortar, tea leaves from the looks of it. The other is ladling thin broth from the pot into a bowl, already holding a strange slurry. It's not just tea anymore. It's a concoction, a potion, possibly a mild dare. He stirs it with a carved bamboo whisk, then taps the edge of the bowl twice, lightly, deliberately. The gesture feels ceremonial, like knocking on a locked door and waiting for history to answer. He notices you and smiles faintly. Lao Cha Tang, he says, old tea soup. The elusive ancestor of your morning's breakfast. Now you're meeting it in its more formal, perhaps slightly crankier, form. The liquid is murky green with a hint of golden oil pooling on top. The man nudges the bowl toward you. You sip. It's salty, with an unexpected sweetness buried deep under the vegetal bitterness. The taste unfolds slowly, layered like lacquer, not instantly accessible. This is food meant to be contemplated, not inhaled. Tang Dynasty cooks didn't just throw things together. Recipes, such as they were, came from a blend of Taoist balance, medical theory, and good old-fashioned trial and error. If it made you strong, calm, or able to ride horseback without vomiting, it went in the pot. You glance at the mortar. The other man is now adding dried mandarin peel, crushed fennel, a pinch of clove, and, was that powdered scallop? You blink. He shrugs. For depth. Historians still argue whether these so-called soup teas were the forebears of medicinal brews or simply an early version of lunch. What's certain is that Tang elites didn't draw a hard line between aiding and healing. A good meal was supposed to align your qi, warm your organs, and keep your spleen from feeling underappreciated. The room grows warmer. A second bowl is offered. This one has rice paste swirled through it, and you spot tiny slivers of pickled lotus root bobbing at the surface. It's odd, yes, but not unpleasant. Like something a thoughtful grandmother might make on a cloudy day, insisting you eat it slowly while she tells you about a dream she once had involving a goose and a poem. A third bowl. You know better now. Sip slowly. This one has wild mushrooms, shredded duck, and a tiny curl of gold leaf. You look up in surprise, but the man with the whisk simply nods. Presentation M. Adders, he says, even when eating fungus. And here's where it gets fun. He pulls out a small wooden box and opens it with a flick. Inside are slivers of pine nuts, roasted barley, dried chrysanthemum petals, and a small pouch of green powder that might be matches long low. St. Ancestor. He spoons each into a bowl with theatrical flair. Tang Dynasty flight, he says, gesturing like a sommelier. Tea 4 ways. You're no longer eating. You're participating. One bowl is earthy and rich. Another sharp and citrusy. One tastes almost floral, like drinking a garden argument. The final one has a tang you can't place, like dried seaweed and copper coins. You try to ask what it is, but he only smiles and says, family recipe. The whisk rests in a shallow dish, stained green from 100 swirls. You stare at it. Simple tool. Monumental impact. These were the early days of what would become the whisk tea ceremonies of law. Her dynasties. Here, in this quiet corner of the palace, monks and chefs and scholars all passed it back and forth like a holy relic. You lean back, stomach buzzing gently with salt and herbs. This isn't the kind of full that weighs you down. It's a hum, a resonance. Something has been balanced in you, restored. Maybe. The man with the whisk begins to clean the bowls. He does not rush. Each is wiped with a damp cloth, then placed on a shelf in descending size order. Nothing clangs. Nothing drips. It's a silent ritual. More performance than chore. Meanwhile, the other man is writing something in a small notebook. You glance over and catch a phrase, water temperature, slightly less than angry. You nod. That feels about right. Before you leave, they offer you a gift, a slip of rice paper with a drawing of a bowl and steam rising from it. The lines simple but graceful. You tuck it into your sleeve. A reminder, soup isn't alwa. Why ask what you think it is? And tea never stays just tea. You step back into the hallway, the paper sketch warm against your wrist, and the whisper of steam still curling in your nose. The scent fades as you walk, replaced by the soft tang of ink and the faintest flicker of wax. Someone is nearby, writing perhaps, or copying, or possibly just pretending to do either so they can stay in the shade. You round a corner and find yourself in a scriptorium. Rows of low tables, their surfaces peppered with ink stones, brushes, parchment, and the quiet intensity of scholars. At the far end, a figure is, bent over a scroll, lips barely moving, as if murmuring secrets to the page. But what catches your eye is not the scholar, it's the tray beside them. A small, lacquered box sits half open, revealing something unmistakable: dried tangerine peel, ginseng root, tiny curled shrimp. The scholar dips their brush into ink with one hand while their other drops a slice of preserved plum into a small bowl of greenish liquid. It smells like tea, but it isn't tea as you've ever known it. There's a fishy scent and a hint of mushroom and something sour like vinegar left out in the sun. The scholar sips calmly between lines, completely unfazed. Maybe it's a concentration brew. Maybe it's punishment. Hard to tell. You're starting to realize something. Tang Dynasty people drank soup all day long. Sometimes disguised as tea. Sometimes definitely just soup. Sometimes hovering in that philosophical gray space where you wonder if you're having lunch or being slowly healed. One of the scribes gestures for you to sit. A fresh scroll is unrolled. A second bowl is passed to you. This one's clearer than the last, a light broth with slivers of white turnip and something that might be dried clam. There's a whiff of star anise, and floating on top, a single, perfect leaf of cilantro. Is soup pretending to be minimalist art? As you sip, the scribe speaks. Tea is the flavor of clarity, he says, but soup is the flavor of memory. You don't know what that means, but it feels like something you should write on a tote bag. You peer to scroll. It's not just writing, it's a recipe, or part of one. A description of proportions and placement, but laced with metaphor. 3 pinches of windroot for the morning, it reads. 1 curl of duck skin for the sorrow that follows. Okay then. Historians still argue whether these culinary scribe hybrids were cooks who learned to write, or writers who got bored and started inventing flavors. Some records even suggest that imperial chefs were required to keep taste diaries, tracking the subtle changes in ingredients with the seasons, or how certain blends affected the dreams of their masters. Dreams mattered here. A dish might be meant to encourage prophetic visions, or gentle sleep, or the easing of grief. Your soup, according to the scribe, should bring insight. A clean tongue makes for clean thought, he says, handing you a sliver of pickled radish. Across the room, A younger apprentice is preparing something more dramatic. A tea soup for winter, he says. But it's spring. Yes, he nods. But sometimes you miss the cold. He drops peppercorns in. A mortar and begins pounding. This soup has attitude. The base is a broth of dried fish and fermented tea leaves aged in bamboo tubes. He adds mushrooms, soy, a twist of orange peel, and a blackened leek stalk that hisses when it hits the pot. You back Awa. Why slightly? He grins. This one is not for beginners. The bowl, when it's finally served, is opaque, dark as pond water before a storm. The taste is bold. Not bad, not good. Just confident. Like it knows more than you and isn't afraid to let you know. You manage a few sips. Your tongue feels like it went on a philosophical retreat and came back wearing linen robes. A debate breaks out among the scribes. One claims that the original Tang tea soup always included garlic. Another insists garlic was considered vulgar and better suited for laborers. A third says garlic was used only during funerals to keep the ghosts interested. None agree. Everyone nods like that's fine. In the middle of this, someone brings out dessert. Yes, dessert. It's a sweet tea soup, which sounds like a contradiction but actually works. Thin, almost translucent, laced with osmanthus flowers and a hint of honey. Floating in it, tiny dumplings filled with black sesame paste. You sip and feel like you've been hugged by someone who smells faintly of ginger. This is where your head starts to feel pleasantly heavy. You lean against a wooden pillar, the taste of osmanthus lingering, the soft scratch of brushes on parchment lulling you towards stillness. It's quiet here but not empty, just like the tea, just like the soup. Someone begins to hum, low, rhythmic, maybe a lullaby or a drinking song. It blends with the click of ink lids and the gentle slosh of ladles. You close your eyes for a moment, not to sleep, just to stand better. The room smells like warmth and time. Before you leave, they offer you a final bowl. It's mild, with mung bean and almond slivers, and it tastes like the color beige, soothing, soft, oddly dignified. You drink it slowly, every drop. You rise, nodding thanks. One of the scribes hands you a folded square of parchment. On it, a drawing, a spoon hovering over a teacup. Underneath, a single word, balance. You slip it into your sleeve and step quietly into the hallway, the air now tinged with sandalwood and faint wood smoke. You've only just begun this journey, and already your tongue and your thoughts have changed shape. You drift through the corridors of the palace like a leaf on a calm stream, still tasting the last slivers of almond and mung bean lingering on your tongue. The scent of sandalwood stays with you too, gentle and reassuring. It's the kind of scent that seems to both follow and lead you like memory in smoke form. Outside, the light has shifted. Late morning now, warm and gold, brushing the tiled roofs and painting long, soft shadows under every wooden beam. The palace breathes at a different rhythm here. There's no rush, only quiet intent. Somewhere in the distance, a bamboo wind chime tinkles in the breeze, and the sound makes your ribs relax without permission. Your steps take you through a wide courtyard with polished stone paths and neatly trimmed herbs. Mint, chrysanthemum, and something sharper, maybe mugwort. You inhale deeply. Yes, definitely mugwort. Igriega. What you think? It could also be dried celery leaves. Either way, someone's cooking with it. Ahead, a cluster of women in saffron and teal robes move in and out of a covered kitchen, carrying baskets, ladles, and, most strikingly, a carved wooden tray stacked with porcelain bowls. These aren't the usual ones you've seen. They're deeper, wider, rimmed with delicate blue dragons chasing each other around the edge. These are soup bowls, certainly, but ceremonial ones. A tall woman with hair coiled like a sculpture spots you. She nods once, a little stern, and beckons you forward. You follow. At this point, resistance is futile and unnecessary. This is where the real stuff happens. Inside the open-air kitchen, the smells hit you all at once. Fermented bean paste, scorched scallion, roasted tea leaves, something fatty and slow-melting, probably pork belly. It's intoxicating. You Breathe through your mouth like a beginner, and one of the cooks chuckles under her breath. At the center, an enormous brass pot simmers gently, its surface trembling with tiny bubbles. A nearby assistant ladles out a sample into a tasting bowl and passes it to the lead cook. She lifts it one hand, smells it without sipping, and sets it aside with a nod. A new ladleful is drawn. This one gets a sip. Her eyes narrow. The soup isn't just soup. It's tea-infused bone broth, steeped with pewer leaves that have been buried for 2 years and then smoked with pine. In it float mushrooms shaped like delicate fans, slices of ginseng, and what might be shredded bamboo shoots or a particularly enthusiastic root vegetable. The broth is brown, deep, mysterious, like a story with too many layers to tell at once. The assistant returns with a bundle of scallion roots. Not the green bits, just the roots, tiny white threads curling like calligraphy strokes. These are cleaned, then toasted dry over flame, and drop. Add into the pot. A hiss, a perfume of earth and ash. Everyone nods. Historians still argue whether this type of soup was developed as medicine first or as a comfort food that simply became medicinal by accident. Some scrolls suggest it was given to scholars before imp or Tan exams. Others say it was reserved for morning rituals to warm the body without overwhelming the heart. In Tang culture, food and emotion were inseparable. Soup wasn't just for hunger. It was for grief, joy, pregnancy, solitude. You didn't ask someone how they were feeling. You asked what soup they need. In one corner, a young boy no older than 10 is slicing dried tangerine peel into ribbons thinner than thread. His hands move with the confidence of someone who's done this every day of his life. You glance at the woman overseeing him. She shrugs. He cried once, and we gave him duck broth. He stopped crying. Now he works here. A different pot is simmering nearby. This one's simpler. A broth of green tea, watercress, and tofu skins. It smells clean, like a freshly made bed. Someone adds a splash of rice wine, not enough to tea. Asked, just enough to loosen the tension in the air. You're handed a bowl. This one is purely medicinal, you're told. Meant for clarity. And yes, it tastes like it. Faint bitterness, an after hint of citrus, and a distinct impression that your brain has been scrubbed with mint. One of the cooks, tall, with laughter lines and a scar on her wrist, explains that certain soups are made to match certain hours. This one is for mid-morning, to keep the stomach awake but the heart steady. Dysprosium afternoon soups, she says, are more relaxed, sweeter, less opinionated. You file that away for later. A debate breaks out at the prep table. One of the younger women has added a chunk of candied ginger to her test batch, and an older cook is not impressed. Too loud, she mutters. Ginger should wisp. Yeah. The younger one snorts and adds another chunk. You mentally root for her. The final soup of the hour is the one you're asked to help with. It's a clear fish broth, steeped in jasmine tea and thickened slightly with egg white ribbons stirred in at the last moment. Your give. And a long-handled ladle and told, not too fast. The egg likes patience. You swirl the broth gently, watching the whites bloom like flowers. It's hypnotic. The kitchen settles into a rhythm, ladling, tasting, adding, adjusting. No one rushes. Everything moves to the pace of breath. Even the steam curls slowly, like it knows this isn't a place for haste. You sip a spoonful of your jasmine egg creation. It tastes like a memory you didn't know you had. Clean, faintly floral, warm down to your bones. A bell rings somewhere far off. Lunch hour? Prayer time? Poetry break? And the kitchen shifts again. Bowls are arranged, cloths are folded, pots are covered. But the smell lingers, as if the walls them. Cells have soaked in centuries of flavor. You step out into the courtyard again, bowl in hand, the taste still curling at the back of your throat. There's no more doubt now. In the Tang Dynasty, tea wasn't just a drink. It was an ingredient, a conversation, a way of speaking to the body and flavors. You sit on a bench beneath a fig tree, warming your hands around the porcelain. In this moment, the entire world feels like broth, rich, slow, and exactly the right temperature. The breeze tugs gently, Tee your sleeve as you finish the last sip of jasmine egg broth. You sigh, not out of fatigue, but from that very specific kind of satisfaction that only comes from being thoroughly warmed from the inside. Out. Even your knees feel looser, somehow. A soft clang of ceramic against wood signals that someone else has just placed their bowl on a tray. And with that, the mid-morning ritual draws to a close. You don't return to the kitchen. Not yet. Instead, your feet carry you across a shaded walkway, past hanging gourds and wind-dried herbs strung like garlands along the eaves. A few low-voiced servants pass by carrying baskets of citrus, their robes dyed a dusty russet and speckled with what might be sesame flour. One of them hums an off-key tune about bamboo shoots in spring. You pretend not to nod. Eyes how catchy it is. As you reach another courtyard, the air thickens slightly, not in temperature, but in presence. It's quieter here, almost ceremonious. A trio of monks kneel around a low table covered in scrolls and bow, while their heads bowed in focus. You linger at the edge, not wanting to intrude. But one of them looks up, smiles with all his teeth, and gestures for you to come closer. Apparently, today is soup fi, Losafi hour. In the center of the table is a vessel unlike any you've seen yet, carved from black clay, shaped like a lotus blossom in bloom. Steam unfurls from its mouth like a curtain, revealing a pale broth wit. Golden flecks swirling in slow eddies. One monk ladles out a portion, his hand steady as an architect's, and sets it before you. You hesitate. He nods. You sip. It's bitter. Not in a bad way, more like a challenge. The kind of bitterness that asks you questions before offering comfort. Ginkgo leaves? Probably. Maybe some chrysanthemum root. Definitely dried, orange peel. It tastes like wisdom with sharp elbows. Historians still argue whether monks developed these broths for spiritual clarity or digestive relief, or both. What's certain is that the bitter teas and soups they favored were deeply intentional. In a world full of flavor, bitterness was chosen, not avoided. It trained the tongue to listen carefully. The monk with the big smile says something about the body having seasons, just like the land. This soup, he claims, is a winter broth, meant to stir what's stagnant, to wake up the inner fire. You nod, as if you understand. You do not, but you feel warm all the same. To your left, a younger monk is grinding something in a small stone mortar. The pestle clicks rhythmically, and as he lifts the lid, the aroma hits you like a wave. Toasted rice and aged tea. The blend, D, is dry now, but he tells you it'll be steeped into a thick congee-style soup tomorrow. Today it rests, a reminder that some flavors need time to decide who they are. Another bowl is passed to you. This one's thin, more like a tea than a soup, the color of rainwater touched by rust. It's made from fermented plum, pine needles, and tea leaves smoked over jujube wood. The taste is shocking, tangy, smoky, and then weirdly sweet. Your eyebrows do things you didn't authorize. The monks laugh gently. It turns out this brew was once considered an antidote to melancholy. Not depression exactly, but the kind of listlessness that arises in long winters or longer wars. Even court poets were prescribed it when their metaphors turned flat. You glance at a nearby scroll, half unfurled. The brushstrokes faded to a soft gray. One character stands out, Ing Jing, stillness. That feels right. This is a place made for it. A conversation drifts your way, soft and unhurried. The monks discuss whether soup is a medium or a message. One says, it carries what we can't say with words. Another replies, it reminds us what we've forgotten to feel. The third just keeps sipping, nodding like that was obvious all along. You're offered dried hawthorn to nibble, a palate cleanser, they claim. It's tart, almost cheek-pinching, but strangely cleansing. Your mouth feels reset, your thoughts clearer. Maybe soup is a message. The afternoon sun slants into the courtyard now, and you realize time has passed without your notice. Again, it's as though each bowl dilated your internal clock a little, stretching moments into eternities. One monk points to a bell at the far corner of the courtyard and explains that the next meal will be simpler. Broth with mung beans and barley, no spice. For sleep, he says, you blink. It's not even lunch, and already they're planning rest. Priorities. They offer you a last taste before you go. A spoonful of concentrated pure broth, aged 15 years, boiled down with licorice root and black garlic. It is intense, like drinking a slow thunderstorm. Your tongue feels like it's learned something, maybe several things. You stand, bow awkwardly, and thank them. In Mandarin. Badly. The monks don't mind. One of them hands you a small clay token, pressed with the shape of a lotus. For digestion, he says, though you're not sure if he means physical or emotional. As you step back into the hallway, the sounds of the outer palace slowly rise again. Footsteps, murmurs, the faint ring of a distant chime. Your stomach is full, but your mind even more so. Soup you are. Eli's isn't a recipe. It's a way of noticing. You glance at the token in your hand. It's warm, smooth, comforting, just like the broth. You pass through another arched doorway, this one carved with swirling clouds and dragonflies, and enter what seems to be a storage room, though storage in a Tang palace looks more like a treasure gallery than anything resembling your pantry back home. Light streams in through slatted windows, revealing rows of ceramic jars, bamboo baskets, and paper-wrapped bundles arranged almost theatrical symmetry. Everything here is labeled with delicate brushwork. Some labels you can read. Most you can't. A young assistant in teal robes glides past, holding a scroll and muttering measurements under her breath. She pauses briefly to offer you a nod, then disappears between two towering stacks of dried mushrooms. You follow, gently brushing your fingers along the rims of glazed crocks. Inside, salted plums, preserved jujubes, pickled radish, dried scallion threads, fermented soy mash. It smells like time, deep, rich, patient. In one corner, a low table is laid out with open bundles of tea leaves and spices. A cook sits cross-legged, sorting through dried slices of angelica root with a look of serene concentration. He glances up as you approach, gesturing for you to sit with a lazy flick of his fingers. You do. The cook hands you a slice of what looks like wood but smells like warm cinnamon and old books. Tong chow, he murmurs. You nod as if you already knew. You did not. It tastes bitter, a bit peppery, tree bark that had a secret. He points to a bowl of dried chrysanthemum buds and another filled with something that resembles fossilized worms. Gan chow, he adds. Licorice root. Apparently the worms are not worms. They're cordyce. P.S. fungus. You're not sure if that's better or worse. The cook explains that Tang Dynasty kitchens didn't always draw clear lines between food and medicine. Everything was both. Every ingredient served multiple purposes: flavor, heat balance, energy flow, seasonal alignment. Soup, in this context, was alchemy. A bowl of tea soup wasn't just a dish, it was a diagnosis. Historians still argue whether this blurring of cuisine and medicine originated from Taoist dietary theory or from much older shamanic traditions. But what's certain is that Tang-era cooks needed more than just good taste. They needed a working knowledge of anatomy, weather, and qi. You watch as he adds dried pear slices to a simmering pot of pu'er and yam. For lung dryness, he says, the combination smells like forest leaves and early autumn. He drops in a scrap of dried tange. Rind peel. The pot puffs a polite cloud of steam, then quiets down like it's listening. A scroll near the table contains a recipe written entirely in metaphors. 2 petals of falling frost. A thumb's worth of mountain shadow. Steep until regret softens. You wonder how anyone ever am. And I get to cook anything, but you also kind of get it. The assistant reappears, this time balancing a bamboo tray filled with ceramic cups and long-handled tasting spoons. She sets 1 cup in front of you. It contains a pale, cloudy liquid, slightly thick. Earthen tea, garnished with 3 tiny goji berries floating like punctuation marks. You sip. It tastes calm. There's no other word for it. Subtle, a little sweet, a little earthy. like a footnote you don't realize was important until much later. The cook watches you. Lotus sa li. Ly bulb. White fungus, he says. Very peaceful. Next to you, he lays out a folded cloth and begins arranging preserved ingredients in rows like calligraphy. Strips of burdock, slivered bamboo shoots, dried dates, white chrysanthemum petals, everything, ing dried, everything waiting to be remembered. He tells you that these are shelf-stable dreams. That's not the real translation, but it's how he says it. Soup isn't just eaten. It's remembered, rehydrated, reincarnated with hot water and intent. Even a forgotten ingredient can come alive again if treated with care. He hands you a dried plum, almost black and puckered. This, he says, was picked 4 summers ago by a widow who talks to birds. You don't know what to do with that information, but you nod respect. Fully and eat it. In one corner of the room, bundles of dried herbs are hung upside down, casting faint shadows on the paper screens. Mint, mugwort, ginseng. You catch a whiff of dried osmanthus, sweet, fragrant, almost honeyed. It brings to mind summer nights and things not quite said aloud. A quiet bell chimes somewhere in the distance, not urgent but definite. The assistant stiffens slightly, then bows and moves toward the door. She pauses and turns back, holding out a packet wrapped in wax silk. For later, she says. You accept it without question. The cook smiles and begins repacking his bundles. He hums to himself, something in a minor key that curls like incense. Every soup is a letter, he says quietly, but some letters are written in steam. You leave the room with your parcel in hand, unsure of its contents but certain of its significance. Outside, the light has shifted again, warmer now, angled. The palace seems to sigh around you. Prepa. Ring for late afternoon. You realize you're not just learning about soup. You're learning how Tang Dynasty kitchens remember. Through spices and roots, yes, but also through ritual, repetition, and a slow kind of reverence. It's not about taste. It's about time. You follow the echo of your own steps now, gently retracing the tiled corridor lined with silken hangings that flutter even without a breeze. As you walk, the air thickens slightly, heavy with the scent of oil, steam, and something roasted. Another kitchen, perhaps, but this one sounds louder, busier. Laughter, metal on metal, the hiss of something hitting a hoe. Dipan. You round a corner and step into a long, high-ceilinged room alive with motion. This is where ingredients become meals, where theory meets fire, and where the quiet meditations of storage and steeping give way to the boisterous choreography of actual cooking. Fires blaze beneath bronze woks. Assistants move like tides, passing bowls and trays and bunches of scallions back and forth without bumping. Elbows. One old man sits calmly by the hearth, stirring something with a wooden paddle as if it were the most delicate act in the universe. The head chef here wears robes of indigo and saffron, a mark of both rank and stain resistance. His beard is forked, his eyebrows long enough to be expressive on their own. He greets you with a quick N. OD, then points toward a shallow ceramic bowl on a nearby table. Inside, shredded duck, finely chopped garlic chives, and something gelatinous and vaguely translucent. Jellied stock, he says, as if that clears everything up. You watch as he ladles tea directly over the duck mixture, transforming it before your eyes into a hot, shimmering, fragrant soup. The scent hits you. Smoke, anise, something green and peppery. And your stomach actually growls, loud enough for the assistant next to you to stifle a smile. This is no ceremonial broth. This is meal as lifeblood. It's hearty, punchy, complex, exactly the kind of soup a Tang courier might drink before riding all night toward the Silk Road. Historians still argue whether these tea soups evolved from medicinal brews, Buddhist fasting broths, or simply the desperation of someone holding both leftover duck and a pot of hot tea. But over tea, IME, they became a legitimate culinary category, with dozens of regional variations and methods. The chef hands you a bowl, hot enough to make you juggle it awkwardly before managing a sip. This version has notes of fermented black bean, ginger, and some tiny dried shrimp hiding in the bottom lick. A little surprises. It's salty, sharp, and oddly invigorating, like a conversation with someone who disagrees with you in just the right way. You're ushered to the side, where a smaller table is covered in things that resemble toppings, although no one seems interested in labeling them. Minced mushrooms, chopped preserved lemon, sprigs of cilantro, toasted sesame, pickled chrysanthemum. Each person chooses a combination like they're assembling a poem. An elderly cook shows you her bowl, green radish slices arranged like flower petals, floating around a nugget of fried tofu the size of a coin. She grins and says something in a dialect you don't recog. Nice, but the tone is unmistakable. Now that's dinner. You're reminded again how fluid meals are here. No rigid recipes, just frameworks, like melodies with room for improvisation. And in these Tang kitchens, improvisation is everything. A stew might be EET one day, spicy the next. A broth might start as a cure for cough and end up as the centerpiece for a poetry contest. Someone near the hearth is grinding something in a stone mortar, dark leaves and golden grains crushed together with the rhythm of a lullaby. He lifts the lid and lets you sniff toasted tea leaves wit. Roasted millet. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. Breakfast. The concept of meals in Tang China was less about categories like breakfast or dinner and more about cycles. Morning warmth, midday strength, evening quiet. And within each cycle, tea often played a supporting role, not just as a beverage, but as broth, sauce, paste, or marinade. It was culinary duct tape. It went with everything. You notice how everyone in the room carries themselves with ease. There's no panic, no platz, just steady work and the occasional burst of laughter. Even the loudest moments feel muted psalm. Ihao, like the room itself, is lined with velvet. At one table, two apprentices are arguing gently about spice ratios. One insists on more Sichuan pepper. The other waves a dried tangerine peel like a counterpoint. They settle it by cooking both ver irons and passing them around. Everyone votes with raised chopsticks. The chef reappears beside you and hands over a small wooden box. Inside, dried slices of smoked turnip. You chew one. It tastes like fog and pepper and stone. Snacks, he says, for the journey. You're not entirely sure what journey he means, but you nod. It feels important to agree. A gong sounds soft, resonant, just one strike. Shift change. The apprentices begin cleaning up without being told. Fires are banked, woks oiled, rice scraped into waiting bowls. A quiet descends like curtains drawing closed. You're offered one last bowl, lighter this time, with floating egg threads and a single piece of lotus root shaped like a wheel. It's a closing note, a palate cleanser. You drink it slowly, not wanting the flavor to end. And as you set the bowl down, someone slides a folded note under it. It's blank, until you tip it toward the firelight, and faint characters appear. A recipe, the head chef murmurs. But only when you're ready. You nod again. Your face is warm from soup. Your hands smell like sesame and steam. And your heart, unexpectedly, feels full. You walk back into the corridor. The air is cooler now. Outside, the sky is starting to hint at evening. The corridor leads you past a carved wooden screen and into a quieter courtyard, one that feels almost forgotten by time. Ivy creeps up the stone walls, and a single water basin ripples as if something just passed through, though the air is still. A breeze stirs, bringing with it the faint aroma of plum blossoms, mingled with a hint of something roasted and resinous. In one shaded corner sits a man with an ink brush and an open scroll. But this isn't a calligraphy studio. It's another part of the Tang kitchen puzzle. He's not writing poems. He's sketching dishes. Diagrams of ingredient arrangements, careful notes in tightly spaced characters, and in the margins, what appears to be commentary in verse. You peer over his shoulder. It's a description of a tea infusion. Said broth served at a governor's banquet, written entirely in 5-character lines. Yes, it turns out Tang chefs composed recipes as poetry. Because why not? You sit quietly nearby, watching the way he dots each stroke with care. Beside him rests a shallow lacquer box. Inside, tiny slips of dried fruit and curled pieces of candied tea root. You're offered one. It's chewy, tart, and warming, like if ginger and caramel had a thoughtful conversation. The man tells you, in a voice so soft you almost miss it, that during the Tang Dynasty, certain cooks were also considered healers. They were trained not just in ingredients, but in humors, seasons, and star charts. You didn't just make food, you balanced the body and the cosmos in one bowl. He waves toward a tattered chart pinned behind him. Zodiac animals, paired with herbs and symptoms. Historians still argue whether this integration of medicine and cuisine was more spiritual than scientific, or vice versa. But even today, echoes remain. A hot cup of chrysanthemum tea after fatty pour. A pinch of bitter orange in winter stew. A dollop of sesame paste to cool the liver and soothe the mood. The man opens a small tin and reveals dried tea leaves rolled into perfect spheres, dragon pearls, he calls them. They bloom in water like underwater fireworks. He drops one into your bowl, pours hot W. A tear over it, and you watch it unfurl, leaf by leaf. It's oddly calming. The world gets quieter just from watching tea open. You sip. It's floral and earthy, with a hint of something you can't name. It's not a flavor, it's a mood. Elsewhere in the courtyard, two younger cooks are trying to slice a daikon radish, so thin it flutters in the wind. They hold it up to the light, proud. One whispers, "You can only do it if your heart is quiet." You believe them. Nearby, baskets overflow with ingredients gathered that morning. Wild greens with jagged edges. Golden mushrooms shaped like tiny parasols. And a squat clay pot that smells unmistakably like fermented fish. You nod respectfully and back away. Someone stokes a small brazier and places a slender pan over it. Into this goes a paste of powdered tea, rice flour, and honey, stirred gently until it thickens into something like mochi. It's formed into discs, brushed with sesame oil, and sprinkled with crushed walnut. The cook explains, these are traveling rations once, sturdy and sustaining. Soldiers carried them into mountain passes. Monks, too, hid them under robes. You chew one slowly, surprised at how filling it is. Like eating a sentence that's been carefully composed for your stomach. The courtyard grows warmer as the sun dips, casting golden light on the curved roof tiles and turning the ivy to bronze. A breeze rustles the parchment scrolls hanging on a nearby clothesline. Yes, CLO. Thesline. Some recipes, apparently, were stored like linens, dried, aired, and rotated with the seasons. A woman emerges with a bowl of millet tea, thick, slightly gritty, like the midpoint between porridge and potion. She explains with a smile that Tang farmers drank this in the fields to keep cool. Yo, you ask why? She shrugs. Body heat, she says. You fight it with warmth. A contradiction? Maybe, but it works. She sits beside you and begins peeling a fruit that looks like a cross between a pomegranate and a lemon. Inside, soft, pinkish segments that smell like pepper and lavender. She offers you a bite. It's sharp and your eyes water. She laughs. For digestion. Here, nothing is just flavor. Everything has a reason. Sometimes astrological, sometimes intestinal, occasionally both. A pair of old clay statues guard the courtyard entrance. One is chipped. Someone has drawn a mustache on it. You don't ask why. It feels like a secret you'd have to earn. And in the farthest corner, half hidden by a curtain of drying mint leaves, is what might be the Tang version of a pantry. But it's more like a shrine. Shelves lined with ceramic jars, each one label. D in brushstroke shorthand. One is marked simply with the character for rain. Another, wind from the west. You open that one. It smells like cinnamon and thunder. You ask what it's for. No one answers. A cook just winks and says, try it on melon. You sit with that sentence for a moment, then tuck it into your brain like a tiny paper boat, ready to be unfolded later. The courtyard dims, and lanterns are lit, paper shades glowing like caught fireflies. Tea is poured again, this time into cups no bigger than your thumb. The final brew of the day is quiet, nutty, almost sleepy. You sip slowly, watching the lantern sway in the breeze, and feel something shift. Not just your body sinking into stillness, but your mind too. The day's noise, even its wonders, begins to fade. And in the silence that follows, you hear only the softest sound. Someone humming. A tea song, maybe one without words. The kind that rises with the steam and disappears into the stars. You wake slowly, not from sleep, but from that half-dreaming state that happens and the world around you turns soft. Your legs are still tucked beneath you, your hands wrapped around a cup that has long since gone cool. Somewhere nearby, someone is slicing fruit, the rhythmic Thursday, in K of the knife as steady as a heartbeat. Overhead, the lanterns sway just slightly, casting long shadows that curve like calligraphy. This part of the Tang kitchen isn't about banquets or bustling marketplaces. It's about preservation, about keeping flavors alive long after the season has turned. You wander into a room that smells Lee. Cook 5 types of vinegar and 10 types of smoke. Hooks dangle from the ceiling, holding fillets of fish and shreds of radish. Nearby, bundles of herbs hang upside down, their leaves crisped into mimir. A boy is fanning a tiny charcoal stove. On top of it, a clay pot bubbles with something thick and greenish-brown. He glances at you, grins, and offers a word that sounds like plum brew. Your hand. A small wooden spoon and take a tentative taste. It's sweet, salty, and mouth-puckeringly sour all at once, like someone made a sauce out of time itself. Historians still argue whether Tang cuisine was the height of complexity or just a really efficient way to keep people from getting bored with millet. But what's undeniable is the artistry. These weren't just preservation techniques, they were culinary spells. A smoked duck could be wrapped in paper and stored in ashes for months. Dried lotus seeds were ground into powder and folded into rice cakes. Pickled mustard greens could last through 3 emperors, give or take. A woman in a saffron robe shows you a heavy ceramic jar. She removes the lid, and a waft of fermented bean hits your nose like a philosophical challenge. Inside is debanjiang, spicy, fermented broadbee. Ayan paste. She spoons out a bit, mixes it with sesame oil and chopped chives, and dips a sliver of cucumber in. You try it. It's wow. Fiery, earthy, and somehow grounding. Like edible gravity. In the corner, 2 older men argue over whether smoked carp should be marinated in wine or vinegar before drying. One thumps the table. The other gestures at a scroll. It's unclear who wins. A dog snarls. Ozza is nearby, ears twitching whenever someone mentions bone. You pass a low shelf lined with what looks like tea cakes, but these are pressed bricks of sour plum, used for making a cooling summer drink. They're chipped off bit by bit, like savory chalk. You pop a flake into your mouth, and it's instantly refreshing, like a gust of wind through a canyon. A gong sounds softly, and the cooks begin to gather in the center courtyard. Not for feast this time, but for inventory. One by one, they announce ingredients: dried lily bulbs, preserved goose e.g. wind-dried mushrooms, and someone records them on a bamboo ledger using a brush so thin it's practically a whisper. A girl brings out a bowl of thickened tea syrup, dark as molasses. She tells you it was once reserved for palace guests. You dip a fingertip in. It's bitter, sweet, and strangely medicinal, like mollis. SES with secrets. Supposedly, it strengthens chi and sharpens the mind. You're not sure about the second part, but your tongue is definitely awake. You help wrap pickled greens in oilcloth and stack jars of preserved kumquat under a straw mat. Everything has its place, and nothing is wasted. Even the peels will become seasoning or medicine, or AC. HEW toy, if you're kitchen dog. Later, someone hands you a sliver of candied ginger dipped in tea salt. It's intensely flavored, like someone condensed a thunderstorm into a bite. A fitting treat for a day that's been full of contradictions. Warm but spicy, quiet but electric, ancient but familiar. The preservation room feels like a cave of memory. Every shelf holds stories. This dried peach once hung in a prince's garden. That jar of fermented tofu was stirred with a silver spoon for luck. The Plum vinegar was started on the day of an eclipse because it just seemed right. And here you are, in the middle of it, a guest among ghosts of ingredients, learning that flavor isn't just taste, it's time, layered and stored until the moment calls it forth again. Someone hums an old tune as they sweep the floor. The broom whispers across the stone like falling rice. Outside, rain begins to patter on the roof, light, polite, as if asking permission. You close your eyes for a moment and inhale. Even the air here has flavor. Rain paints everything in slow, slanted strokes, but it doesn't stop the kitchen. If anything, it thickens the air and deepens. The smells. You step outside into the garden courtyard, where the stone tiles are slick and the herbs are drinking gratefully from the sky. The cooks have retreated beneath awnings and canopies, but tea work continues. A boy is plucking mint leaves, and a woman in a russet tunic is chopping spring onions with the kind of concentration normally reserved for poetry. Here, the garden isn't a place for leisure. It's an extension of the kitchen, a living pantry. Every plant is functional, every root and blossom destined for a bowl, a jar, or a remedy. You squat near. A row of perilla leaves, their purple undersides catching the light like bruised silk. A girl next to you picks a few, rubs them between her fingers, and offers them to your nose. It smells of anisette, Indi green, like licorice that wandered into a meadow. The tea plants, of course, sit higher up in stone pots shaped like lotus blooms. These are not your average shrubs. They've been pruned with a kind of reverence, and one even has a ribbon tied around its base. For luck, someone shrugs. You're shown how to pinch the leaves just right, thumb and forefinger only, no tugging, no bruising. It's like harvesting secrets. Historians still argue whether the Tang tea gardens were inspired by Buddhist temple layouts or vice versa. Some scholars point to monastic records detailing symmetrical rows of herbs. Others claim a fields came first and the monks simply liked the view. Either way, there's a sacred geometry here, and you're walking through it. Rain trickles off the edge of a tiled roof, and someone catches it in a bamboo ladle. This water, you're told, is better for brewing delicate teas. Less aggressive. You don't question it. Not here. In a world where even raindrops are curated, you simply accept. A man in teal robes kneels by a patch of chrysanthemum, harvesting the flowers with bare hands. He explains that they'll be dried and steeped into an autumn tea to cool the fire in your heart. SK if that's metaphorical. He just smiles. To one side of the garden, there's a low wooden shed filled with baskets of collected things. Twigs that smell faintly of cinnamon, dried mushroom caps with patterns like maps, and bundles of mountain pepper berries. You lift a lid off one container and discover dried orange peels curling in on themselves like sleeping caterpillars. The scent is shockingly fresh. Someone hands you a cup of warm, rain-brewed tea. It's green, pale, and cloudy with steam. As you sip, the flavors unfold like a polite conversation. First floral, then grassy, then something vaguely yes. Wheat that vanishes before you can name it. Nearby, an older cook is grinding dried lotus seed into powder using a round stone mortar. She works slowly, steadily, like she's done this every morning for 50 years. Her hands are wrinkled, her wrist strong. She tells you this powder will be added to cakes for a feast next month. The emperor's birthday, she says with a shrug, like it's no big deal. The rain eases into mist, and the sounds of the kitchen begin to rise again. Chopping, sizzling, the soft clink of clay bowls being stacked. You help carry a basket of fresh herbs back inside. Careful, not to crush anything. Each sprig is treated like treasure. You pause by the teapots again, watching the rain beat up and roll off their leaves. There's something meditative about the scene, the patience of plants, the quiet insistence of flavor being coaxed from the earth. And just when you think the moment can't get more peaceful, someone begins to hum an old folk tune. It drifts through the courtyard like incense, curling into the corners of your awareness. You don't know the words, but you find yourself swaying slightly, matching the rhythm. You've gone from guest to gardener without realizing it. The kitchen is humming again, and now it smells like mischief. You follow the trail of fragrance through a maze of low counters and steaming pots until you arrive at the heart of the chaos, the dessert station. Yes, even in the Tang Dynasty, they made room for sweet things. The head of this small team is a wiry man in a saffron tunic with sugar dust smeared along his sleeves. He's stirring something viscous and shiny in a bronze pot while muttering under his breath about temperature, timing, and the tragic consequences of impatience. You instinctively step back. The pot contains malt syrup, thick, dark, and bubbling like the surface of a quiet volcano. It'll soon be poured over rice flour to form tangy sweet jelly cubes that wobble like secrets. You get handed. Want to try? It quivers in your palm and tastes like toasted honey and quiet pride. Nearby, an apprentice is rolling sesame balls between her palms with the kind of reverence usually reserved for prayer beads. She glances at you, then back at her tray. Her fingers move with precise repetition, dip, roll, pat, repeat, until each ball is identical in size and shine. You watch her work for a while, hypnotized. Historians still argue whether the Tang court favored sweet dishes more for flavor or medicinal benefit. Some point to royal menus that read like dessert buffets, honey cakes, candied lotus root, and reed dumplings soaked in spice syrup. Others believe it was all about balancing qi, that mysterious life energy that demanded you eat sweet things after bitter ones. Who are we to argue with Desser? T-logic? To one side, a boy with cheeks dusted in flour is kneading dough for almond pastries. He's barely taller than a counter, but his motions are confident. He tells you, very seriously, that if you press too hard, the almond oil will escape, and the cake will lose its soul. You know, because obviously, there's a large bamboo steamer near the fire, its lid domed and sweating. Inside, glutinous rice buns puff gently in the heat, filled with red bean paste or walnut powder. When one bursts, it's concert. Good luck for the day. A cook chuckles and mutters something about auspicious buns. You consider stealing that phrase for your next fantasy novel. Someone pulls you aside and shows you a set of dessert molds carved from wood. They're shaped like plum blossoms, phoenixes, and dragons. For special occasions, the woman explains and presses one eye. The mound of bean paste. The imprint is crisp and elegant, like calligraphy. The dragon has a mischievous smirk. You get to try one of the simpler sweets, a small, chewy cake filled with tea-infused sugar. It's soft, warm, and slightly smoky. The flavor lingers, like a story half-told. You take a second bite and imagine poets gathering in moonlight, trading verses and pastry crumbs. One of the cooks tells you a joke in rapid-fire Tang dialect. You understand maybe 2 words, but you laugh anyway. It's contagious. He gestures at a half-burned batch and shrugs. Even the gods burn. Their fingers sometimes. It's the Tang Dynasty version of oops. Outside the window, the rain has stopped. A patch of sunlight cuts across the kitchen floor like a blessing. The dessert crew moves slower now, wiping down boards, sipping tea from chipped cups, licking a stray bit of syrup from their thumbs when they think no one's looking. You lean against a support beam, full of sugar and serenity. The kitchen doesn't quiet down so much as it exhales, dessert done, dignity intact. In the corner, someone hangs a cloth banner with calligraphy that reads, "Sweetness calms the wind." You don't ask what it means. You just feel it. The sweetness of that final bite lingers on your tongue. You eat as you're guided away from the kitchen and into a quieter annex of the compound, an area reserved not for cooking, but for preparation of ingredients, storage of precious commodities, and experiment. As so subtle they feel like magic. This is the pantry, yes, but also the Tang Dynasty's version of a food lab. The room is dim, cool, and smells faintly of dried citrus, aging soy, and something fermented you can't quite place. Rows of clay jars line the shelves, each labeled in looping brushstrokes with names that translate roughly to plum blossom brine, autumn pear vinegar, or simply careful, very sour. A scholar cook in a russet robe waves you over. He has ink stains on his cuffs and a slightly manic look in his eyes. On the table before him lies a scroll, unrolled halfway, its edges curling with AG. Notes from the Lu School, he whispers reverently, on the proper timing of pickling turnips. You nod, as one should when pickled turnips are involved. He dips a brush into black ink and circles 3 characters on the parchment. This, he says, tapping the scroll, is where the flavor lives. You're not sure if he means metaphorically or chemically. Possibly both. In a large basin, an assistant is massaging salt into shredded radish with a seriousness usually reserved for political negotiations. The pickling process, you learn, is not just preservation, it's transformation. Fermentation is the culinary soul of the Tang pantry. The pickles here don't just last, they evolve. Nearby, a stone mortar holds a pungent paste of fermented soybeans, thick, glossy, and potent. The air is rich with umami, though they didn't have that word yet. They just called it deep flavor, or mouth-filling joy. You try a tiny dab on your fingertip. It's salty, sweet, a little bitter, and astonishingly alive. Your brain does a small somersault. Historians still argue whether the earliest iterations of soy sauce in China began as brine bean slurries like this, or whether those evolved later from fish-based sauces traded along the southern coast. Ask lines. What's clear is that the Tang court loved layers. Layered clothes, layered poetry, and most definitely layered flavors. At one workbench, a girl no older than 12 is plucking petals from a chrysanthemum and floating them in a dish of rice wine. When asked, she explains this will be served cold at the end of a banquet. To please the poets, she says, without a trace of irony. A wooden drawer opens to reveal dried mushrooms the size of your palm, frilled and dark like folded leather. Cloud ears, says the cook beside you. Soak them too long and they go quiet. Just enough, and they'll sing. A pair of elderly workers pass through with baskets of sun-dried tofu skin, layered like parchment scrolls. They talk softly about the best days to ferment plum wine and whether rain affects ginger RO. OT strength. You suspect they might also be discussing you. That's fine. You're still chewing the phrase tofu scrolls. Tucked into the corner is a bamboo cage containing something that rattles softly. You lean in. It's tea, dried into bricks, wrapped tightly in mulberry bark, and labeled with stamped seals. These aren't tea for drinking. These are currency. The Tang had paper money, but tea bricks were real value. You touch one and feel the weight of a meal, a journey, a small debt repaid. A small boy drops a jar. It shatters. The room goes still. No one yells. Instead, the head pantry master simply sweeps up the shards with a straw brush and sighs. Now we'll air out, he says meanie. In the space, or perhaps the child. You're invited to help label the next batch of preserved duck eggs. The ink is thick and the brush long, and your characters come out wobbly. The cook chuckles and adds a flourish to your mistake. No, it has character. Outside the storage window, clouds gather again. The light dims, just slightly, casting everything in warm sepia. The room feels ancient, timeless, a pocket of order where salt and sun and patience con. You breathe in, full of ginger and vinegar and secrets. You step back out into the late afternoon haze, the sky a gentle wash of gold and pearl, and the courtyard hums with quiet intent. The kitchen residential have calmed to coals. Steam no longer hisses from bamboo baskets. It curls like incense from clay chimneys, as if the kitchens themselves are exhaling after a long, productive breath. You follow the path to a quieter garden tucked behind the northern wall. It's modest, peaceful, but alive with purpose. Raised beds brim with herbs, fringed chives, bright coriander, serrated shiso, and, in one shady corner, a squat tree is heavy with small, hard quinces. A cook in saffron robes plucks one, holds it to his nose, and then grins at you. Terrible raw, he says, glorious when braised W. It's hawthorn. The garden isn't just for food, it's for balance. The Tang believed in harmony between flavors, between humors, between the human body and the seasons. That's why one of the kitchen apprentices is Kerr. Gently painting a chart on the wall showing which organs are hot in winter and which foods cool them in summer. You spot ginger, lotus root, turtle shell, and, yes, tea again, this time assigned to BA. Lance the spleen. Poor spleen, always needing adjustment. You sit on a worn bench under the fig tree. A woman is slicing something thin, almost paper thin, onto a lacquered tray. You ask what it is. Deer tendon, she replies casually. Boiled until soft, the endrille. Later we'll shred it into soup. She offers you a sliver. It's chewy, oddly savory, and tastes like antique leather in distant mountains. She pours you another cup of tea, one that doesn't taste like soup this time. It's floral, soft, a little woody, and when you ask what it's made from, she shrugs. Bark and blossoms, she says. We just. Tea call it quiet tea. Next to you, an old monk is sketching spirals in the dust with a chopstick. He hums tunelessly as he works. You ask what he's drawing. He replies, the way steam moves. Fair enough. Children skip through the garden path, dodging baskets of dried jujube and yam chips. One clutches a turnip like a prize. Another chases a butterfly into a bush of perilla. No one yells at them. This is a place where food and play occupy the same sacred space. The cook in saffron gestures for you to follow him to the far side of the garden, where a square pond reflects the late light. He tosses in a handful of dried lotus seeds. For the fish, he says, and D for luck. The koi rise lazily, like ancient spirits called to the surface. Their colors, russet, ivory, obsidian, mirror the palette of Tang dining ware. Historians still argue whether this culinary garden practice descended from imperial Buddhist monasteries or blossomed independently in court culture. Either way, Tang cooks treated herbs and roots no. Tea just as flavors but as metaphysical agents. Spices could balance a temperament, flowers could soothe grief, and even vinegar, sharp as it was, might cut through melancholy. You help gather a few stalks of garlic chive, their scent pungent on your fingers. Good for joints, someone mutters. And bad dreams. You decide that's reason enough. As you walk back toward the compound, the roofs glow with sunset. The day is ending the way a Tang meal ends. Slowly, richly, and with a final flourish of something bittersweet. Outside the kitchen, someone's setting fire to a small bundle of herbs, juniper, maybe, or mugwort. The smoke curls upward like a blessing. Not for the gods, this time, but for the cooks. For you. 4. The ghosts of dinners past. You take one last look at the now-quiet kitchens, the shuttered storerooms, the gently flickering oil lamps, and wonder how many of these same steps have been walked before. By cooks, by monks, by hung. Poets whispering about soup. And then you hear it, the first night cricket chirping from beneath a clay pot. The monk with the chopstick nods in its direction and says, that one always starts early. You smile. Of course it does. By the time you return to the main hall, the lanterns have been lit. They glow like quiet moons, their paper skins painted with faded brushstrokes of pine branches and CLO. Ul motifs. The compound breathes in shadow now, long, soft, and blue-tinged. You step carefully over a coil of rope near the door, left behind from unloading crates of millet. Even the rope feels antsy. And tea, dusted with flour and stories. Inside, the low tables have been cleared of their grand dishes. What remains are the afterthoughts. A smudge of sesame paste, a lonely date pit, a chopstick resting askew. A cook is humming a folk tune. As he wipes each table with a square of cloth that smells faintly of star anise and old rain. He doesn't rush. There is no such thing as rushing, not anymore. You ease down onto a folded cushion near the kitchen threshold. A dog is asleep beside you, thin, long-legged, one ear twitching with dreams. There was no collar, only a bell tied with red string. Sumio. And he has scratched wind into the clay tile by the dog's bed. You decide that must be its name. A kettle begins to whistle gently, not with urgency, but with ceremony. The final tea of the evening is being prepared, not the brash, brothy kind from the kitchens, but a dark, earthy brew meant for S. Leap. It's poured into small bowls lined with copper and handed out by a boy no older than 10, who carries the tray with both hands like it's sacred. Maybe it is. The others sip without speaking. The room has gone soft, like we're pulled over the ears. You catch a whisper here and there, someone murmuring about a dream they had, another telling a story about our grandmother's pickled radish recipe that cured the emperor's cold. Whether or not it's true seems irrelevant. You cradle your bowl. The tea is bitter and grounding, full of something smoky and rooted, like bark steeped in time. It tastes like the end of a long day, like a comma before a full stop. The fire in the hearth has burned down low. The shadows dance slower now, as if they too are growing sleepy. You hear one last clang from the pot room. Someone washing a ladle used for soup-turned tea. Hey, there's something poetic about that. A cook appears with a basket of fabric bundles, wrapped leftovers for the next day, tied neatly with strands of reed. She sets them on a shelf and turns to douse the lanterns one by one. Each time she does, the room dims another notch, until all that's left is the light from the open hearth and the occasional flicker of a firefly outside. Someone starts to snore. It's not loud, just enough to make Win the dog shift in his sleep and sigh. A final fact drifts across your memory. Tang physicians sometimes prescribed laughter with meals, believing that joy aided digestion more than any herb. Historians still debate whether that was science or poetry. You suspect it was both. You finish your tea. The air smells of cedar and ashes, and you stretch your legs toward the last warmth of the fire. A woman slips past you, cradling a pouch of dried chrysanthemum blossoms. She drops a few into the coal. They hiss, release a burst of sweet smoke, and the scent wraps around the room like an old memory. Someone hums. You feel in your chest before your ears catch the tune. And just before your eyelids begin to sink like boats on calm water, the boy with the tray tiptoes by and tucks a folded scrap of paper under your cup. You unfold it slowly. On it is written a single Tang character, drawn with care, Jing, quiet. Perfect. And now, the fire is only embers. The last thread of smoke drifts upward like a silk ribbon, loosening into sky. Around you, the night has settled its weight across the tiles and rafters, acros. Rice fields and distant hills like a soft, warm quilt. You sink just a little deeper where you sit, your spine uncoiling, breath lengthening. The cushion beneath you has molded to your shape. Your fingertips still hold the faint memory of the tea bowl's age. Gone now, but remembered in the way your hands relax. There is no more movement in the room. Even the dog has stopped twitching. Outside, a moth flutters against a shuttered window once, then rests. The moon has climbed higher, not silver, but pearl soft, watching everything with quiet approval. Somewhere nearby, a low wind begins to curl through the bamboo, and the leaves rustle like paper being gently turned. You imagine it's the sound of time folding itself over for the night, pages of a slow book closing one by one. You let your mind do the same. No need to follow the next thought. Let drift like a tea leaf spinning on still water. The cooks are asleep. The horses have stopped shifting in their stalls. The last bowl has been rinsed and dead on the drying rack. Even the charcoal has stopped glowing. Everything that needed to be done is done. Tonight, the Tang Dynasty sleeps. And so at last can you. Good night, traveler. May your dreams be quiet and your sleep deep.